We all strive to show up in life ready to give it everything we've got, from our kids to our jobs, our partners, and our parents. As women, we're always striving to be at our best. But that's tough to do, right? When we aren't feeling our best mentally. And there is this gap between what we set out to do and what we really are capable of doing and feel up to doing. Now, most of us have suffered at one point or another, from anxiety to brain fog to mood swings, maybe even depression, myself included. And it's not easy, right, to juggle these many stressors that are continually thrown our way when we just aren't feeling sharp on any given Monday, or when we're just simply riddled with anxiety. Fortunately, there are strategies that can help ease these symptoms, and one of the most foundational and accessible is our food choices. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that food can solve it all, but food can impact how we feel mentally and therefore how we show up and handle all those daily stressors. In fact, food could be one of the causes contributing to our chronic anxiety, mood swings, and the challenges we sometimes have of simply getting out of bed and just feigning a smile. Food, as they say, is medicine. It can heal us, but it can also make us sick, both physically and mentally. It's one of the foundations upon which physical and mental health depends. So how do we feed our brains to meet life's challenges head on, to ensure we're just simply powered up for the full lives we want to lead as women? What are the foods that actually are going to give us that mental fuel that we need to perform at our best rather than just push through? Now, Jillian, please talk to us about the connection between our mental health and how we feed our brain.
Well, Lori, the fact that there is a burgeoning field called nutritional psychiatry means that there really is a direct connection between what we eat and how we feel. And I think this whole idea will hit home if we do a quick refresh and look behind the scenes to see exactly what goes on in our body and our brain with respect to how they're linked.
I'm assuming you're referring to this gut-brain connection that we've talked about on ElleExcel before. And if so, can you start by just telling us a little bit about the role food plays in this conversation, let's say, between brain and our digestive system?
There are actually a number of conversations going on between the two. And one of the most prominent is the one between our brain and our gut microbiome. So our microbiome, as many of us know, it's located inside our digestive tract, and it's made up of trillions of microbes. They're also known as gut bacteria. And incredibly, these minuscule microbes have an impact on almost every facet of our health, including our brain.
It seems a bit mind-boggling, doesn't it? Like, no pun intended, but that these microbes could have such an impact. Like, what is going on?
Well, there's two big things that are happening. First, not only do we have trillions of microbes in our digestive tract, but alongside them, we have a number of key mood regulating neurotransmitters, including serotonin, dopamine, and GABA. And our microbes influence the functioning of these neurotransmitters. And then secondly, there are foods that enable the good microbes or the bacteria to thrive. And then, of course, there are foods that cause the bad bacteria to proliferate.
You know, that resonates for me completely as someone who has high dopamine, and having formerly been diagnosed with seizure disorders, I became very familiar with these fluctuations in my brain. And what you're helping us, I think, better understand, and certainly for me, is that by eating certain foods, we can impact our moods directly, our anxiety levels, and maybe even, I don't know, am I stretching? Is it our overall happiness?
Not stretching at all. Absolutely. And there are hundreds of studies that have been done that show that if we create a positive environment for our gut microbiome to thrive, that this is going to have a direct impact on our mood and our mental well-being. And one key way to create this environment is through what we eat.
Yeah, that's amazing. You know, and so many foods we eat have greater impact on things like blood sugar spikes than others. So talk to us a little bit about the relationship between those blood pressure spikes and our mental wellness.
So, as best we can, we want to have stable blood sugar levels throughout the day. And this happens when we eat a balanced diet and certain combinations of food. But of course, if we eat too many of the sugars and refined carbs, and just to reiterate here, all carbohydrates eventually turn into sugar in our body. But refined carbs and sugar itself, they do it immediately. So this sugar gets into our bloodstream too quickly, and then it causes these blood sugar spikes. But it's not necessarily the spikes that we notice. Rather, it's the crash after the spikes, especially the impact that it has on our brain. It's when we get moody, we get tired, we get irritable, we experience brain fog. It's often hard to concentrate. And then if these spikes continue throughout the day, which they often do, it's just really tough to show up as our best selves.
I get that. Yeah, yeah, and like so many of us, we ride this wave daily, right? And to bring this sort of full circle, and not only are we getting the moodiness from the blood sugar spikes, or to your point, the crashes, but these carbs and sugars are also feeding bad bacteria in our guts, which will in turn impact our mood neurotransmitters located in the gut. So in effect, it's just like a double whammy, isn't it?
Exactly, exactly.
So let's bring this all back to how we can feed our brains so we can just be at our best. And we want to keep our gut microbiome happy, certainly, but we also want to avoid these blood sugar spikes and the resulting crashes. So what would be at the top of your list to recommend?
Well, it will come as no surprise to anyone that the first thing would be to eat the rainbow, meaning eating as many colors of fruits and vegetables as possible. But there's a particular reason to revisit this when it comes to our brain health. And that is because the naturally occurring colors in these foods are a sign of something called flavonoids. And what these are, they're plant pigments that are especially crucial for our brain. And our gut bacteria plays a critical role in metabolizing or accessing these flavonoids. And then in addition, because flavonoids have both an anti-inflammatory and an antioxidant or effect or properties, they're known to be very effective at treating anxiety and depression. And then the icing on the cake for all this, although of course everything is interrelated, is that these flavonoids have been shown to improve our overall cognitive performance in at least two ways. One, by enhancing the connections between our neurons, and then two, by keeping our blood vessels healthy to ensure proper blood flow into our brain.
Yeah, bring on the flavonoids, right? Like these dark leafy greens, such as kale that you talked to us about, spinach, arugula, broccoli, sprouts, asparagus, berries, tomatoes, peppers, squash, and eggplant. Oh my, like anything with color, right? And
Yeah.
I get it.
Color is super important, but we don't want to exclude white and brown vegetables, even though when I just say white and brown, it sounds not great. But they have lots of really special elements to them, including flavonoids. But in addition, they also carry a phytochemical called allicin, which is very important for our brain health. So think the onions, garlic, mushrooms, leek, cauliflowers, things like that. And then just as important as flavonoids is fiber. And that is because fiber feeds our good bacteria. And what happens then is that our good bacteria will produce these chemicals called short chain fatty acids, which are really important for both our brain health as well as our overall health. And then the good news here is that all the fruits and vegetables we just mentioned not only have flavonoids, but they also have high fiber content. And then, of course, we want to look at the whole grains that have high fiber, things like steel-cut oats, barley, quinoa, farro, those sorts of things.
Yeah, there's magic in so many of these good food choices that get you from all angles in a good way. And of course, there are things which cause our blood sugar to spike and dampen our brains, stuff like refined carbohydrates, I'm guessing.
You've got it. The problem being that the fiber has been removed from those foods, so they do not do us any favors. And this is one reason why we want to pair all our carbohydrates, including vegetables and fruits, with a healthy protein or fat. Because neither protein nor fat raise our blood sugar levels of any significance. Mm-hmm. So pairing them alongside a carbohydrate, whether it's refined or complex carbohydrate, what it does is it helps minimize the spikes and the crashes, and it keeps us fuller longer. And then not only that, but by pairing fruits and vegetables with a healthy fat, what that does, it ensures maximum absorption of all the brain healthy fat soluble vitamins in those foods. So for example, if you're eating carrots, carrots are really high in vitamin A or beta carotene, one and the same. So have carrots along with hummus or tzatziki. If you're eating berries, you can pair them with some almonds or plain yogurt, or toss pumpkin seeds in your leafy green salad. Huge benefits.
Thank you. And so flavonoids and fiber for mental health. There are also steps we can take to specifically just say focus on the brain itself and
Yeah,
repairing the brain ongoing.
yeah, absolutely. And in this case, we're talking brain-friendly fats, the ones that are both anti-inflammatory and they help repair brain cells as our cells age. And as we know, the most important are the omega-3s, DHA and EPA. These are known anti-inflammatories for our brain, and they're actually considered the number one nutrient to fight age-related cognitive decline, especially DHA. So think salmon, mackerel, anchovies, sardines, herring, even caviar if you can afford it. And then other healthy fats, of course, include nuts and seeds, avocados, olives, olive oil, fish, seafood, all those sorts of things.
Yeah, there's a simple set of themes, isn't there, around for what nourishes us, and these foods just keep repeating on our sessions here. And for saturated fats, do I assume we need to completely ban them, from our diets, or when it comes to brain health? What do you think?
You know what? Not totally, but there's no question they can be inflammatory to our blood vessels, especially those delicate little vessels that supply our brain. So what we need to do is we need to start looking at the total amount of saturated fat we consume during the course of a day.
Mhm.
Butter, cream, milk, cheese, coconut oil, red meat, and then of course all the processed foods because it adds up really quickly.
I got it. So flavonoids, fiber, and healthy fats. That's a lot to chew on, right, for better brain health. But I'm assuming that it's not enough to simply add the good fats into our diet without sort of starting to minimize and eliminate the anxiety triggering foods so prevalent in our grocery store shelves today. So what do we need to cut back on?
Well, you're absolutely right. If we have an inflamed gut, we've got an inflamed brain, which takes us right back to our gut microbes. We know the good bacteria feeds on fiber. We know the bad bacteria feeds on sugars and carbohydrates. Plus, they are also negatively impacted by food additives in so many of the foods that are lining our grocery store shelves. And one of the biggest challenges we have is the typical North American breakfast. And that's because most of our go-to breakfast foods are made up of sugar and refined carbs. The cereals, the juice, the toast and jam, the bagels and honey, the muffins. And if we start the day like this, or if our kids start the day like this, it's really tough to get back on track. So we want to include more healthy proteins and fats, the scrambled eggs with spinach, steel cut oats topped with fruit and nuts, or plain Greek yogurt topped with granola and berries and nuts and seeds. If we start to rethink breakfast, it helps avoid the blood sugar roller coaster, and then we can replace it with the mental fortitude that we need to take on the day.
Yeah, I just love this. I learned this the hard way. And I like starting my day with protein as you feel more satiated through the day. And as you say, it sets the tone for your body and blood sugar. And we live in this carb and processed food culture, and grocery stores are just lined with savory snacks and baked goods. And so too are our work lives, where they're scattered about and easily accessible. But whether it's salad dressings or prepared foods or chips or iced tea or that kind of stuff, I even know that some granola bars or protein bars that profess to be healthy really rarely are when you read the labels. So you really have to be smart about what you feed your brain and belly with.
Well, there's no question that these foods are dragging us down mentally and physically, given the inflammation that they cause. So again, it's important to be aware of how much of these foods that we're eating and then what we're eating alongside them. It's also really important to become more tuned to how we feel after eating. Like if we're cranky, if we're lacking energy, if we're
Mm.
struggling to keep our eyes open after a meal, that's not normal. It means our body and brain are trying to tell us something and we need to listen.
Yeah, I've learned this as I've gotten older. I really see those cues. There's certain stuff my body is just telling me it doesn't like. And our body really works as this system, doesn't it? Where the brain and the gut work as close cousins. And we have a lot of food for thought here, alongside of getting the right amount of water each day. And you have a winning combination if you do that. But our brain, of course, is made up mostly of water, some 80% or so, and it's essential for every chemical reaction to take place in the brain and for energy production, certainly because it carries oxygen to the brain.
It's actually quite amazing. Even a 3 to 4% decrease in water can cause things like fatigue, brain fog, reduced energy, headaches, mood swings. So it literally can impact our cognitive performance.
Yeah, in fact, I have a rule around that. Whenever I feel like I have a headache oncoming or I'm in the middle of a headache, before taking anything, I drink a glass of water and then I wait 10 minutes. And in that time frame, if things settle out, it's usually a dehydration headache versus something different. So food for thought on that one, or water for thought. So we hear this here that food is certainly medicine, right? It can heal us, but it can also make us sick, as we've talked about physically and mentally. So a couple things to keep in mind. Nutritional psychiatry is this whole new field, as Jillian pointed out, of research on how food impacts our brain health. So food really, really matters. So that gut-brain connection, this means creating a positive environment, because an inflamed gut means an inflamed brain. They're related. So blood sugar, we want the rolling hills, not inflammatory spikes. So we start that off by eating well at the onset of the day, and it really sets the tone. So how are we going to keep our brains in top shape? We're going to eat this rainbow of colors of fruits and vegetables, and the browns and whites, they're in that rainbow because they give us flavonoids, psyllium and fiber, and whole grains and fiber as well are things that we want rich in our diets. We pair these fruits and vegetables with healthy proteins. You've heard this before, where it's like coda carb from Jillian, and then the fats to avoid blood sugar spikes as well, which will also help us increase the fat soluble vitamin absorption. And healthy fats, of course, are key, especially DHA and EPA, to help keep inflammation in check. And we want to minimize these foods with sugar and refined carbohydrates and food additives. And drink your water. It's a friend on many, many levels. And of course, listen to your body after you've eaten, after you drank. Have a gauge so that you understand what it's telling you. Because when you do, your brain and body will respond in kind to your health.